So you were at ESPN during like those times when they used to have those like "This is Sports Center" commercials. Were you ever on any of those commercials?
No, man, I was the business guy behind the scenes. Those were good days at ESPN, though, and at the time, I was in an ad sales role, so I got involved with a lot of the really cool, marketing, advertising campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're a college football fan, when the Chick-fil-A cow comes up on the screen and throws his like signs up on that was my doing back in the day.
Oh, no
One of
way!
my partnerships, yeah.
Eat more chicken.
Eat more chicken. So I worked in television ad sales at ESPN and got to be involved with some really cool things with college football and Monday Night Football, and actually got some Monday Night Football helmets behind me here. And NASCAR and NHRA, and so got a really cool education on the sports media business there and advertising and sponsorship. So
Gotcha.
never in front of the camera, always some business guy behind.
Yeah, what's just like the most ridiculous story that you could tell that we could use is just like the beginning banter. So, am I cutting out? Is my internet good?
It did just for a second, but I don't know if it was your side or mine.
JT, what are you getting?
Yeah, I think you're fine.
I'm fine. Okay, good. Okay, cool. I'm just trying to do some sort of story that we're like super laughing about, just like some ridiculous thing. Like, who's your favorite football team?
I'm a suffering Atlanta Falcons fan.
All right, well, we can't do that because they may pick a coach.
I don't know. That's pretty funny. I'm sorry, man.
Right,
I was there for years.
That could be the whole intro. They're like, all right.
Well, but it is crazy, right? Like, if we end up hiring Bill Belichick as our coach, like I don't know if I can be excited about it. And the guy just destroyed us. Like the most historic moment in my favorite team's franchise was this guy coming back in a historic come from behind win in the Super Bowl. And we're such a bad franchise that we gotta go hire the 75-year-old version of that guy.
That guy.
I grew up in Atlanta. My dad had season tickets. We went all the time. It was like a dad, and now I live in Chicago, so I picked between two horrible franchises. So I stayed loyal to Atlanta, and I had pretty mixed emotions about the prospect of hiring Bill Belichick as our head coach.
Yeah, I would use that. The only thing is, by the time this airs, he may actually be the coach of it.
Be the head coach. Yeah.
Can we just joke about like one of those ESPN commercials or whatever? Like, was there like a funniest commercial?
So my fun ESPN story, right? So again, I grew up in Atlanta, and Chick-fil-A is based in Atlanta, and they're one of my all-time favorite clients. And the reality is that the people at Chick-fil-A are, generally speaking, really good, happy, awesome people to work with. But where ESPN is headquartered in Bristol, Connecticut, at the time, Chick-fil-A hadn't made it to the Northeast.
Right. I remember that. There was one in the Premier Park Mall in New Jersey.
It was few and far between, and yet, but if you're a student of the game, like Chick-fil-A's business is incredible. Like they've never taken $1 of debt. Like they're just a really fascinating business. And they wanted to do all these things with ESPN, but they wanted to do things that stood out from the crowd. They wanted the irony of cows saying "eat more chicken," right? Like that was like their campaign. But ESPN, we had a separation of church and state between content and sales, which I was doing. And they refused to do any of these creative things because they didn't appreciate the brand of Chick-fil-A. So we ended up inviting all these Chick-fil-A executives to Bristol, Connecticut in this boardroom. And I had never seen ESPN in a moment be so humbled, right? the chief marketing officer for Chick-fil-A was like, whose business do you think is better? Chick-fil-A's or McDonald's, right? Or Chick-fil-A and Taco Bell, or Chick-fil-A and Pizza Hut. All these people that are just massive advertisers on ESPN and kind of get their way. And they ran through the numbers, and Chick-fil-A's business was just incredible. Right. And so in a 20-minute segment, we went from the ESPN perspective, not wanting to do anything for Chick-fil-A, to be doing these outrageous cows on the screen and things that all the other guys were envious of. it was, I don't know if it's funny or not, but it's the importance of face-to-face contact, right? Because 3 or 4 years of just like negative history in one 30-minute meeting, when you got the right people in the room to discuss things, it completely changed anything. And a year and a half later, ESPN ended up selling Chick-fil-A the entitlement to one of the playoff games, and they went from a single-digit $1 million advertiser just spending over $30 million a year with ESPN. Wow. All the result of one 30-minute meeting where some executives got humbled.
Wow. All right. So here, let's get to business. Let's get to the racing business. Yeah. All right. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Drag Illustrated's The Racing Business with me, Jason Dukes. This week we have a great show with you. We have Mike Levy of FloSports. Everybody knows about the Pro Superstar Shootout. Everybody knows about just drag racing and what Flo has been doing in drag racing and also just in other sports, but also just the huge history, not the history, but where we are right now in the world with TV being on all different types of screens, including streaming and broadcast and cable and all the mix up that's happening right now as we live through there. And so we have the perfect person to take us through that, tell us about the business of Flo, tell us about the business of all these different screens and what's happening in the sports world. And then also obviously tell us about what's happening with the Pro Superstar Shootout, which will be on Flo Racing. So want to bring Mike Levy on the show. Mike, welcome to the racing business. How you doing today?
I'm wonderful. I really appreciate you inviting me on and thankful for the opportunity.
Yeah. So did I get that intro correct?
Yeah, man, we're everywhere. It feels that way anyway. We're trying really hard to grow in motorsports and obviously make an impact in the drag racing community. But in my role overall, I oversee the rights acquisition business for FloSports over 24 different sports. So there's never a dull moment over here as we continue to grow.
Gotcha. So as we do with the show, we start out with all the things that you're doing right now, and then we pretty much go back to the start and start from the beginning. One of the purposes of this show is obviously to educate, but also to inspire people and to open people's horizons, especially for people, as the broadcasting, if that's what we even want to call it, but as the broadcasting landscape evolves and different things like that, of all the different types of jobs and all the different ways that people can get involved in all those different things. But tell us where it is now. Like give us the landscape of where it is now, in Flo and then motorsports and then drag racing.
Yeah. I mean, look, the Flo story is awesome. It was started by two brothers, Martin and Mark Floriani. One was a college wrestler at Cal Poly. The other was a Division I runner at University of Texas. The Mark had aspirations of being an Olympian, and Martin, I think, never reached his full potential as a wrestler. And really what it came down to is when they graduated from college, they didn't really know what they wanted to do, but they knew that their passions were in their sports. And I will never forget, 8-9 years ago, Martin Floriani telling a story about how, God didn't come down to the United States and declare that football shall be king. Football in America, and everybody's following the NFL, right? It was made into the sport that it is today through storytelling and context building, obviously live coverage, and 24/7, 365 content and context building to make the NFL what it is in America today. And it really doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. It's an American thing. But if you ask them, their belief was the best sport in the world was wrestling. For Mark. And so there's this fundamental belief that any of these sports with scalable, passionate audiences, if the stories were told right and the context was built right and the distribution was right, any one of them could be the next NFL. And so fast forward 15 years from the start in 2006, FloSports' mission really hasn't fundamentally changed. We're all about growing economies for sport so that they can flourish and grow and create more and more content generation and storytelling and context building to make it easier to be a fan. So certainly we're doing that in motorsports. We started in dirt track racing, circle track racing, then we moved to pavement, short track racing. We've done some two-wheel, and as you know, we've made some lofty investments in drag racing because we're passionate about the audience, we're passionate about the sport, and we think we can be a meaningful contributor to growing the economy for the sport, which I know this particular community is really passionate about. I think there's some disagreement about how to do it. But we have what we believe is a tried and true way of growing economies for sport, not only for ourselves, but for our partners as well. So that's the quick background. Flo has 20 different verticals, Flo Racing being one of them. We're heavily involved in NCAA sports. We have the #1 wrestling vertical in the world, the #1 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu vertical in the world. We've got #1 in cheerleading, a marching band. We just acquired a company in hockey, so we do over 30,000 live hockey games a year.
Wow.
Flo's growing, and really our place in the sports media ecosystem is trying to serve underserved audiences. When we see that a particular community has rabid, impassioned fan bases and businesses that support those fan bases, but it's just lacking that thing that takes it to the next level, that's typically an area where we get excited, and we want to explore that and see if we can contribute to reaching the goals of not, again, it's really important, not just of ourselves, but of the athletes and the teams and the media distributors like Drag Illustrated, but also the promoters, Donald Long and the Miller brothers and Victor down in Bradenton. Like, the more we can continue to fund and build their stories, our belief is that the more we invest, the faster the sport grows.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit about the current project, specifically in drag racing, including the Pro Superstar Shootout?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if I'm being honest, we're trying to find our way in drag racing. The growth hasn't been quite as fast as some of the other segments of motorsports that we saw. And I think that's in part because the culture of drag racing is a little bit different. Fans are accustomed to getting things distributed for free. They got to find it on YouTube. And so we met some resistance early on. And I think we walked into a world that had some, for lack of a better word, some PTSD on subscription services and so forth. So we've had to overcome some of that. And part of our way of overcoming that is investing in cooler events and bigger events than existed before us, trying to increase the quality of production that kind of grassroots drag racing has seen historically, hiring what we think is like superior talent, like a Courtney Enders on the production side, Tom Bobaltz and Joe Baker, who produced the NHRA for ESPN for a number of years. So we're really trying to put our money where our mouth is on our side, to reinvest in the sport. We have a pre-existing relationship with a little-known motorsports icon named Tony Stewart. We've really gotten to know him and his team over the years. And when he started making his way and his passion was kind of going towards drag racing, we wanted to stay close to him. And it was kind of a part of ongoing conversations that we had with Tony that introduced us to Richard Freeman and the Pro Gang. And they called us and said, hey, we want to do something different. And if you follow FloSports track record over the years, when we hear different, we kind of sit up a little bit, because we haven't really wanted to do things the way they've always been done. Right. And this group in particular, we found to be highly passionate, super engaged, a really purpose-driven mission. These guys are all in. And it got to a place where it's like, all right, you're our kind of partners. What do you need from us? And we had some long conversations about what success looks like. And ultimately, for us, it was kind of a no-brainer because these are the partners that we look for. We look for the partners that are as passionate about our mission as we are about theirs. Typically that results in success. So right. We're pretty pumped to see what we see.
Yeah. Well, and can you talk about the platform and some of the opportunities of the platform, right? Like I'll just make an analogy to my show. Some people, they're like, "Oh, well, what a good concept. Like I love the long form interviews. Like I wish it was something that had already been done. Like I wish like how come they can't do this on the racing broadcast?" And it's like, guys, they have plenty of stuff to do during the racing broadcast rather than do
Yeah.
long form, hour interviews. So it's like, the like this show basically is to fill in the gaps of where the gaps are. But tell us about some of the opportunities that you guys have with the platform that you have, and some of the things that you guys can do that other people can't do, or just are willing to do that other people don't do.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the biggest difference between Flow and some of our competitors, not just in drag racing, but across all of our sports, is um, we don't stop when the live broadcast ends, right? Filming live drag racing is really hard. Um, Aside from the fact that the cars are going at incredible speeds, the days are incredibly long. Um, the internet at these venues is typically very difficult.
Mhm.
Getting proper sound mixing with all that's going on at these venues is really difficult. It's a big investment for anyone to cover drag racing correctly. We have learned the hard way, right? And I think when we first entered, it was ugly. But I feel like every quarter we continue to improve, and we're really excited about 24 because I think we're gonna really level up in a number of areas. How we're shooting, the quality of the cameras that we're using, better sound, live scoring, which has been elusive for anybody in grassroots racing. We're going to make major strides in early 24 in all those areas. And again, it's all investment, right? It's Flow putting our money where our mouth is and spending more. We're betting on this fan base to embrace it, because the bet for us is that the more we invest, the more community around us is going to support what we're trying to do. And we need that transparently to happen. Wes Buck at Drag Illustrated, I think, is one of the key examples. Donald Wong has been an unbelievable partner with it. They're just buying into what we're trying to do. And that's the level of support we really need. Because we think the economy is undeniable. And we want to be part of growing the sport, not bringing it down. So in terms of other things that we're doing, I mean, Courtney Enders is just an absolute superstar that we've got on our team. I mean, I think she's been on the road 60 out of the last 75 days filming these road to Bradenton segments, where we're trying to bring the personalities of the sport to life in different ways. Obviously, we're doing a lot of podcasts, and that's a great way to tell stories as well. But for us, we want to do a lot of video content that elicits an emotion, because that's the other thing about growing sport, is that you got to figure out a way to become emotionally connected. The avid fan's already going to be there, right? No matter how you distribute it, the avid fan's going to be there. How do we get casual fans to become avid fans? And how do we introduce new segments of motorsports fans or stick and ball sports fans or whatever? How do we evolve them into casual fans, right? That's the hardest part, but that's where growing sport happens. And the best and easiest way to do that is to try and create some sort of emotional connection to the sport. How do we help get them to the track? How do we help them get invested in a particular driver or team or paint scheme or whatever? If we can successfully do that, that's when we start contributing to the growth of sport, and everybody wins.
Yeah, I'll ask this question now. This is normally something that I leave to the further into the conversation as we build our way into that. But I know exactly what you mean, and I know exactly what you mean when you said earlier that wrestling is probably the best. And I'm assuming you mean like professional wrestling, like WWE, like the storytelling type of wrestling, or did you mean like Olympic style wrestling?
So Flow Wrestling, which is one of our channels, like it's all Olympic style wrestling.
Olympic style wrestling.
So
gotcha.
Now it's interesting that you say WWE. Our chief content officer at FloSports came from the WWE.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we have an executive on our team that helped build out WWE's digital streaming platform. And so we do have that mindset, right? It's the WWE. One of the reasons they're so successful is it's not just the live show. Their athletes become celebrities. And as their athletes become celebrities and evolve, sometimes even beyond the WWE, everybody wins, right? And so that's part of it, right? Like, we want to get to a place where we make the stars of drag racing celebrities above and beyond the live event. Again, if that happens and they can cross over, Tony Stewart, great example, he's managed to cross over into so many different segments of racing. Kyle Larson is a guy that we're partnered with who has transcended NASCAR and grassroots racing, and now, he's going to be running the Indy 500 this year. And so when we successfully connect all those dots and create those emotions across segments of the sport, everybody wins.
Yeah.
And so that's a major priority for us. It has been in 23. It will continue to be in 24, and I suspect forever.
Yeah. So listening to this program, there's going to be a bunch of racers and a bunch of people in the racing business who, have great stories to tell. Or maybe they don't know that they have great stories to tell, but they do have great stories to tell. And then, you guys are on the other side, like wanting to tell their story and wanting the access. What's maybe 3 to 5 pieces of advice that you can give people to, almost allow their celebrity to come out, because that's what you guys, one, that's what you guys need, and 2, that will be the thing that draws the emotion, and 3, that's what the industry needs. So what's some advice that you have?
I think the general thing that we've seen for year after year is where everybody zigs, it's best to zag, right? When we're in these emerging sports, doing things the way they've always been done will result in in outcomes that are the same as they've always been. And so we always want to pursue the sport first and be authentic to the sport and treating it correctly. But boy, when we have the opportunities to add personality to it, to add context, to bring some color to it, and again, to create an emotion, and the emotion can run the gamut, right? It could be outrageous, it could be funny, it could be passionate, it could be controversial. When we can create emotions with the sport that draw attention beyond the inner circle, beyond the echo chamber that everybody talks about, that's when you start transcending. And Flo really isn't in the business of just fitting into exactly what is. When we've done that, the community hasn't needed us, right? And so we don't fit in. Like, I run the motorsports business on the B2B stuff, and I do deals. I'm not a motorsports guy, right? I played baseball. But what I've learned over the years of all these kind of interesting sports is that core behaviors are pretty similar. The way people care about their sports, pretty similar. The passion that they bring with it's pretty similar, and everybody wants it to grow, right? And so we get the luxury of applying these different things that we see in cheerleading and marching band and wrestling and jiu-jitsu and hockey sports that we enter. Drag racing, Wes Buck and I have spent a lot of time talking about this. The only thing that I believe holds drag racing back from reaching whatever goal the community has is the community itself. We got to think differently. We got to bring in mainstream sponsors. We got to think about distribution and encouraging fans that a subscription model or a pay-per-view model is not bad, because every single deal that is on FloSports, we are paying for. We are contributing money to those rights holders. And with respect to others that are in the space, if it's being distributed on YouTube, it's the opposite. The rights holder is paying for it to be distributed on YouTube. And then at that point, there's no more money left to market it, right? Because the investment has been made. So it's an echo chamber. You're talking to the same community over and over and over again. New people aren't actually coming in, and flows into it to bring new people in. And then if we're successful, we super serve it. It's the same thing with talent, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, same results. How can you differentiate? How can you call Flo and be like, I got an idea? We want to hear it all, because we want to be one with the community and elevating it. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Well, and it took us down a path of what you and Wes riff about. What else do you guys riff about? If go ahead, tell us some more.
It's all, Wes is known, right? Wes is such a passionate guy. It's all about how do you grow the sport, right? Everything Wes does, he does with a mind of how do you grow the sport. And it's okay to disagree from time to time of how it's being done, as long as people are thinking about how do I grow the sport. You're not gonna bat 1,000, right? And so we keep talking about it. Flo's a lot of chicken and egg. Flo's a lot of test then invest. We've certainly made mistakes, and we're not claiming to be perfect, but we're going to continue to try to push the envelope, and that's what we talked to Wes about: is how can we collectively press the envelope so that neither of us goes broke, but we can elevate the sport. Yeah. And we've my first conversation with Wes, I went to my CEO. I was like, this is a guy I want to invest in. He gets it. And so whenever we talk, it's like, how do we get detractors out of the way? How do we get people on this bus? And how do we keep investing? That's what I think most people don't realize, is that we spend our time thinking about how do we keep investing.
Yeah. No, that's a good place to have your mindset. One of the other things that you, in my opinion, right, one of the things that you brought up is that the try. I forget the exact words that you said, but like trying and failing, or trying and succeeding, and investing, and all those. Like, tell us a little bit just about, like, how do you develop that? How do you develop and keep that mentality in an organization when human nature is like, just, I don't want to fail.
Flo is extremely data driven. Flo is over 400 employees now, based in Austin, Texas. And what we really have is the benefit of a lot of reps. We do tens of thousands of events a year. And we have a data analytics team that measures everything. And so we've gotten to a place where, I'd put ourselves up against the biggest players in sports media and how we evaluate our business and how we make business decisions. And so we call it test, then invest. And so when we see opportunities that we'd like to explore, we gather as much data as we possibly can. And then we probably test. The pro shootout, the pro deal is a test, right? Everybody's putting a ton into it. Nobody knows the outcome because it's never been done before, at least not in recent memory. And so all of us, this is a test. And if it goes really well, if the community supports it, there will be more, because there's an appetite to do more. Mm-hmm. If the community doesn't embrace it, they don't buy tickets to the event, they don't buy subscriptions to Flo and check it out, they don't engage on social media, then we've got our sign, right? And so that's a perfect example of how we do it. And for us, for all of us, it's a really expensive investment. But it's easy to do these tests when you're aligned on philosophy. That makes it a lot easier, that your partner is thinking about the world the same way you are. Put me in a room with Richard Freeman all day long, I will drink that Kool-Aid, right? And I want to run through a wall for the guy. So I think about Richard and his passion for what we're doing here. And, I introduce him to our production teams and our content teams because I want them to feel the juice, right? Flo's got a tagline, you want to stick around for the rush, that I want our guys, our whole company, to feel the rush of drag racing. I felt it. Mm-hmm. And so we want the community to believe in what we're trying to do so that we can continue to invest.
Right. Yeah. So you sound like the perfect person for the job right now. So let's go all the way back and let's talk about the life of Mike Levy, and how did you get to being the perfect person for this job? Like, what was what was the childhood or like the upbringing of Mike Levy like? And like, did you think? Actually, it sounds like you probably thought you were going to be a baseball player. I know that you're from Atlanta, so I almost hate to ask who your team was because I'm a Mets fan. So,
Oh boy,
oh boy, oh boy.
So my man Chipper Jones names his child Shea, right?
All right,
because
hold on,
all he did is hit bombs at Shea Stadium.
Podcast just ended. Some I don't know how that happened. The podcast just vanished and went away. So
Yeah.
I guess that means you're a Braves fan. I'm a Mets fan.
I'm a Braves fan. I was fortunate enough to play college baseball, and I was even more fortunate to get drafted. So I played a little bit of professional baseball. And when I graduated, when I finished playing ball, I tore my rotator cuff, and I happened to be sitting behind a young catcher named Yadier Molina with the St. Louis Cardinals, who, for the non-baseball fans out there, he might be the best defensive catcher to ever play the game, and surely a first ballot Hall of Famer. So my career was going to be short no matter what. So I went into the business world and had aspirations of being.
Were you in the Cardinals farm system? I'm asking because I managed the racetrack at St. Louis, so I'm there for many Audier and pool hosts and Carpenter.
Yeah. I was in the farm system for the Cardinals for a bit, and failed, but that's okay. It was an amazing experience, and I dreamt of being the next Walt Jocketty, who was the GM of the Cardinals, or Theo Epstein. And after I got done playing, I interned with Major League Baseball, and ultimately got onto the business side. Some might say I'm a sleazy sales guy or something. So I got some sales chops.
Well, but so from a racing business standpoint, though, that's I mean, I had to make that. Like I wanted to be a race car driver, but I never had any money and probably no talent and motion sickness. So there's a lot of things, right? So at least like my I need to look at the business side of it happen pretty early in life. But for a lot of people watching this show, like there is a reality at some point. Like it's like, all right, well, I need to get out of the seat and get on the business side of it, and or people who've already made that thing. Tell us a little bit about, like, for real, the actual emotions and the real like life of someone who you go from backup Yadier Molina to like, now I got to go be an intern or go be on the
identity, absolute identity crisis. Like, I was 24, absolute identity crisis. Lost, all the stuff you read stories about people whose playing days are over, or their driving days are over, and it's like that's all they know. And I went to college, but in my mind, I was nothing but a baseball player. And so there was absolutely an identity crisis there. And what I ended up doing was channeling. Anybody that reaches a reasonably high level in whatever sport it is has a different competitive drive, right? And so I spent all of one day crying, right? And then I was like, what's next? It didn't mean the pain wasn't done, but I tore my rotator cuff, so my career ended because I couldn't function anymore.
Right.
And I was old for baseball years. So it was like, okay, what's next? I dive into business. I knew it was going to be business, and it was like, how deeply can I dive into it? And can I compete in business the way I did in sport? And so that's what I tried to do. I didn't know which way. Sport was what I was passionate about, so I ended up staying in sport. Unfortunately for most people that I'm talking to, I can talk. And so I was like, put me in something in business where I can talk a lot. I feel like I'll be okay. And so that's what I did. I bounced around on some sales jobs early in my career. Just trying to put food on the table, like many of us. I was in New York City, and I couldn't afford to live there anymore. So I ended up getting a job. Selling corporate sponsorships for the Southeastern Conference back home in Atlanta. And I did that for a year before ESPN called me. They had a division. It's kind of funny. The original ESPN Plus, not the one we know today, the original one was a regional syndication network of college sports, and they actually owned the sponsorship rights for the Big 12 and the Big East and some other conferences. So I moved to Chicago to help those guys sell those assets. And that turned into an 8-year run selling advertising and sponsorship for ESPN, mostly on the television side.
And so you were in Chicago. You were in Chicago selling for ESPN out of Connecticut. Yeah.
Selling. So ESPN has a Midwest sales office in Chicago, gotcha. About 40 people. So I was one of the guys there, and unbelievable experience, right? You get involved in all the things ESPN on the business side, and learn digital and learn print and learn radio and learn TV, obviously, which is what I did. And it was awesome. I loved my experience there. Along the way, I went and got an MBA part-time while working. And while I got my MBA, I started asking questions about the TV business. Some of the trends that I was seeing, this was in 2005. No, this is 2013-ish. I was seeing some trends that didn't intellectually make sense to me. The beginning of cord cutting and people, cutting the cord on cable. Mm-hmm. Digital was growing like crazy. They shut down ESPN, the magazine, while I was there. And so I started asking some hard questions of the team at ESPN and myself, and ultimately decided it was time to go.
Gotcha. Well, before we get to the decide to go part of it, what were some of the lessons that you learned at ESPN?
Boy, I learned a ton there. I had the privilege of working with really senior level and creative executives, both at ESPN and at my partners. We'd be meeting with the CMO of AT&T and Miller Coors and the previously mentioned Chick-fil-A. And so I got this like real life experience understanding the business objectives of the biggest brands in the world. And if you were curious enough, you could start seeing what real executive leadership looked like and what risk taking looked like and how they analyze performance of partnerships and deals. And so I had this front row seat as a young person to really learn how all these people operate at a high level. And it was back to the athlete thing. It was like I was learning from these veterans, and I had such unique opportunity to see these things. And I just embraced it. I was a sponge.
Yeah.
And so, and with that, you saw bad too, right? ESPN's had some tough times. And so you can see where, maybe subpar leadership results in, layoffs and challenges and client issues and all sorts of things. So, everywhere you are, you get the opportunity to observe people and figure out what you want to take and what you don't want to take. And all of that is information that enables you to kind of lump yourself into the piece of clay that you want to be. So that's I've learned as a lifelong pursuit, but ESPN in particular gave me like this 8-year education and all those things.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about the risk taking and probably the nimbleness that you have to be in a business like this, and just the business in general. I always find it funny with drag racing because it's so technologically driven and people that are willing to like move on a dime technologically, but sometimes, socially or a business thing, it's like super slow and conservative and like, well, but like, stop. Let's just keep doing the way we've been doing it. What sort of just business advice on being nimble, taking risks, and just moving?
So I listened to another podcast recently on drag racing, and it was all about passion, right? And I actually disagreed with it.
If you remember the name, you could say it. We don't care. We don't mind spreading the gospel.
You know what? I'll look it up. I got a screen above me. I'll look it up. And I'll tell you exactly what it was and who it was. It was, to me, it felt like too much passion. Right. And so it's interesting. You mentioned like the technological advancements in drag racing, the constant tinkering on technology to get it perfect. But I have the observation they do that with their vehicles, but they don't necessarily do it with the business. The business is driven by passion and instinct, right? The vehicles are driven by precision and technology. And in my view, it should be the same on both, right? And so I take the learnings that I've got certainly from Flo, right? We're in all these niche sports, and we're now 16, 17 years old, and we've succeeded in these niche sports. It's by looking at the data, right, that you get from your vehicle, that we get from our business, tinkering with it. And then when you get the aha moment on when you can really evolve your vehicle to take it to the next level, you do it. And you don't think twice about it because the data says go.
Right.
And so that's, I think Flo has gotten really good at not going on instinct and passion, but going on data. And when you see it, you get passionate about that. And you get really excited. Gosh knows, I've made some serious mistakes at my time at Flo in terms of pushing something that I felt like should work, and then it bombs, right? Now it's okay. I feel like it should work. Do I have data that supports the hypothesis? If I do, we go fast.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. So tell us then, what happened after ESPN? What was the next phase?
I used bad data and made a fast decision that was wrong. I knew I needed to leave. Yeah, you learn. I knew I needed to leave ESPN. It was time to go and do something different. And I got a call actually from Sony Pictures to start an office in Chicago, a sales office, and I was representing kind of challenger brands at the time. It was a product called Crackle, which is a free-to-air digital streaming service, and Sony PlayStation. There wasn't much sales infrastructure there. There wasn't much anything there. Sony didn't really care about it. And I jumped into it because I was excited about some change and going into a digital space, and it just didn't work. It wasn't right for me personally. The products weren't evolved. I wasn't in a position where I could drive evolution in the product, and it was a miss. But like all misses, you can learn from it, right? And so FloSports started recruiting me while I was at Sony. And I asked a million questions.
Yeah.
It took a year.
So I have a Sony question for you too. Like you said that just personally it just personally wasn't a match. Either what did you learn about yourself during that you didn't know previously, or what did you ignore when taking the job?
I learned the value of curiosity, and that it is really okay to be curious. On my interviews there, this is kind of interesting. On my interviews there, I allowed the interviewer to control the storytelling, to sell me on the opportunity. And I did not ask enough questions about what was already there or what the opportunities were. I just didn't ask enough questions. I didn't know necessarily to ask the questions that I wasn't asking. And so when I got there, it was different than what I expected, because I had created this belief system in my head without cross-checking it, right?
Just made it up.
Well, I wanted something, right? So I wanted it to be so. And so I convinced myself that it would be, and then I got there and reality hit, and I was on like the least important business of this multinational empire. They just didn't give a shit about what I was doing. And so when I saw things that I thought could improve, there was nobody to talk to. Nobody cared, right? And so it just culturally, it wasn't right for me, right? I couldn't make an impact. The product wasn't at the time that interesting, and ultimately Sony has gotten out of both businesses for the most part.
Right.
Fast forward to Flo starting to recruit me. For the guy that hired me was a guy named David Weiss. For about 9 months, I asked him questions. And I asked him so many questions that I think he got really curious about me. And so, we had 9 months of going back and forth and building rapport, and true curiosity, so that when I got into the gig, there weren't surprises. And the one thing I will say about Flo, I'm now 8+ years into this place. There still aren't surprises because I'm still asking questions.
Right.
What I'll say about Mark, who's our CEO, is that everything he tells me that he intends to do with this business, he does. He follows it up. Anything he's done, guaranteed to me as an employee, he's backed up. This has been for my career, being at Flo and getting to build businesses like Flo Racing has just been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I go into these communities where I know nothing, and I just ask questions and I get to learn. And then through asking those questions, I get to take some risk, and the company trusts us on what we're building, and here we are.
Yeah. So you talked about by name. You talked about some of the people who, the Richard Freemans, the Tony Stewarts, the people in the drag West Bucks, the people in the drag racing world that like have really been like attractive to you and that you've seen. Without using names, can you just talk about some of the not necessarily bad experiences that you had, but just people that you saw that were just, and again, please don't use names, actually, like don't use names. Just some of the things that you've run across where it's just like, man, that's some of the stuff that's gonna keep us down or kill it or not have us move along. And again, not from a right or wrong, because there's 1,000 different ways that things move forward, but if there is an answer to that question, can you answer it?
No, there definitely is. And not all partnerships work, right? Not all real, at the end of the day, we're dealing with people. And so people are inherently flawed. And so the things that don't work is when there's not alignment. And when there isn't alignment, we set ourselves up for miscommunication, misunderstanding. And you lose the benefit of mutual benefit.
Yeah.
And any partnership that works has to be mutually beneficial. And so we've had plenty that have gone sideways. And we've got stuff that's on the verge of going sideways today. And so my job here is to try and not only hold ourselves accountable to the partnerships that we created under the framework that we created, but also hold our partners accountable for maintaining that as well and reminding them and ourselves of why we're in this thing in the beginning, in the first place. So business partnerships go sideways. And it is my responsibility to do our very best to hold up our end of the bargain. And I can always go to sleep at night if I feel like we are genuinely doing that. And if we're not, I will be the first person to raise my hand and say we are not holding up our end of the bargain, and coming to that conversation with absolute radical candor. Drag racing is a great example of that. When we first entered, I don't think we met the standard. And I can tell you that every bit of our team here today is working hard to meet the standard. We are asking people for their hard-earned money. We are putting our partners' brands on our platform, which has enormous reach. We need to be value add to these partnerships, not only financially, but in brand, in our distribution and presentation of the product. We need to represent the drivers and the teams and the sponsors. And we hold ourselves accountable to doing a good job on that. And in turn, we hold our partners accountable to put us in a position to do so. Sometimes that's hard.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you for that answer. I think we pretty much got to we've full circled it. Yeah, or is there something else you had to say to get to the end of the circle, back where we left off?
I think at some point in the circle, I said I could talk a lot. So that's
no, that's the point of this show. The point of the show is the point of this show is for you to talk and for me to shut up and just provide the space for you to talk. By the way, too, in that, like, just super thank you for being as honest and candid and just giving us all the info and advice that you did. But I have one last question for you. Actually, it's not a question. It's a question to get you to answer 13 more questions. Are you ready to put up your Dukes?
I've heard the story. I've not yet put up my Dukes ever. So let's see what I got.
All right, here we go. 13 questions about 13. We actually have never really counted. We're not that data driven on the show, unfortunately. So
minimum of 13. I'm gonna hold you up to it.
No, because I don't think there's actually 13 questions. But the only rule here is just limited to 1 minute on each of the answers.
Okay.
All right, cool. So, and for all of these questions, it could either be for you personally, for the industry, for Flow itself, all of that, right? So we're just going to start out with a simple SWOT analysis. What's the strength of either you, the industry, Flow racing, streaming? 1 minute.
The strength is the potential for reach and economic advancement for all. Streaming is mainstream. Everybody that wants something, that it's a premium product, we need to demand that customers, ourselves, are willing to invest in it. That is how you grow sport. You don't grow through free. You grow through investment. So the strength is the economy is there. Collectively, all of us, we got to jump through it, embrace it, and reinvest back into our sport.
Biggest weakness?
The technology is still not perfect. Getting great internet, whether it's at home or on video calls like this, it is not perfect. When your stream goes down at a key moment in a sporting event, it is awful. And I think we're making great strides as an industry. But until we really get there and make it perfect, fans are still going to prefer the traditional TV outlet, and we got to just as an industry get better.
Biggest opportunity?
Unifying motorsports. I don't understand why motorsports has fragmented itself the way it has. If you're a pavement fan, circle track fan, you're that. If you're a late model fan, you're that. If you're a sprint car fan, you're that. If you're a drag racing fan, you're that.
Well, it's probably even worse than drag racing because there's like 12,000
so many forms of drag racing. Intellectually, for me, you've got these mad scientists building these unbelievable machines that go at crazy speeds. The smell of the fuel, the sound of the engines, the exhilaration of going down, making a pass. Why do we prefer to segment ourselves into these niches instead of embracing it all, watching it, and supporting it so that we can, again, grow our sport? That, to me, is the Tony Stewart effect. Tony does that. He's our guy. How do we bring race fans to appreciate all of motorsports so that we can all be economically independent?
Biggest threat?
I think in everything there's an element of selfishness. If we all get too into ourselves, our shared interest in growing the sport declines. Everything has to be for greater good. Everybody's got to make a buck. Everybody. So how do we create a scenario where everybody can make more of a buck than they did yesterday? Again, back into the reinvestment bit.
Yeah. Most overrated thing, either about streaming, you personally, or Flow, or however you want to answer it. Most overrated?
Cost of our subscription. We hear about it constantly. And the reality is that if we priced it at a penny, people would complain. And so we know that we're a premium product. We understand that it's challenging, and we're going to work on pricing solutions to make it accessible, more accessible for all. But anything awesome, we invest in. If we love it, we're willing to invest it. I go to a ball game, I spend $7 on the beer because I really want that beer. And if the product is good enough, it is worth it. And if it's not, we should hear about it.
Most underrated.
No, most underrated about the industry. Again, I think that I hate to talk about money all the time. So I'll go a different way. How much time and investment FloSports has made in telling the stories of the sport. Courtney Enders is the most underrated personality in all of drag racing. She spends her life trying to pour her soul back into the sport through storytelling. And we need more of that.
Yeah. Amen. Biggest mental hurdle.
We talk on my team a lot about head trash. We all come into our worlds with these pre-existing expectations of business, life, people, how they behave, what their thoughts are. In my business, in my team, we call that head trash. Use a baseball movie. We got to clear the mechanism and come into our daily conversations and the echo chambers that we all live in, and psychologically be okay asking for help, asking curious questions, asking, how does this work? Why do we do it this way? What's going on? And it's really hard for people to do that. That is a mental hurdle to make yourself feel uncomfortable going into new environments.
What's the last thing that you have to say for the generation that went ahead of us, the people older than us?
Boy, you left us a dump. Boy, I don't know the answer to that. What's the last thing
you could always pass or phone a friend.
Hey, look, for our parents, you say thank you, right? Being a parent is really hard. You raise your kids the best you can. You start from a place of thank you, but then you look to the leadership in this country and to many of the business executives that are just get out of the way. Let the young people come in and try something different.
How about last word for the younger folks?
Work really hard. Work really hard. Think about others first. And just be ready to put in the hours and go into it as a sponge with an open mind and try to learn and carve out who you are. But just work hard. Motorsports people, by the way, they don't have that problem. Motorsports people work.
They're automatic car workers. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. Again, as a non-motorsports guy, motorsports people work hard. Now, the curiosity part, not so sure. Bring that work ethic with a curious mentality about how to do things differently and make it better. I'm deeply passionate about the motorsports community.
How about last word for your peers?
At Flow, I was at a funeral recently. This is getting morbid. I was at a funeral recently, and one of the things that the gentleman that died used to say all the times was, keep your head down and take short, choppy steps. And so for my peers, business is hard right now. The economy is challenging. There are layoffs everywhere. Put your head down and take short, choppy steps, and let's keep advancing, even when it's hard.
Final question. Hopefully that's 13. But final question is...
These are hard, by the way. I didn't expect this. This is hard.
Well, we're good though, right? I didn't set you up on anything. All right, cool.
No,
Final question is
good. I like it.
What's your ask, either personal or for Flow from the community here at the Undrag Brit? Drag Illustrated is the racing business. What's your ask from the community?
I want feedback. From the drag racing community, we're not there yet, and we know we're not. Okay, but we are genuinely trying, and we want to create incremental value for the sport and the fans and all the stakeholders. I want feedback. How can we be better? We got to charge money, right? I know everybody wants it for free, but we put a lot out for free on social, so we're trying there too. But how can we better contribute to the sport to make it better for all? And my ask is, email me, write on our social channels. We read it, even if we don't respond. Reach out to Courtney Enders. Come visit us at the events. How can we add more value? Because we want to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the show this week.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, and we'll definitely see you around and be sending you some advice and subscribing and all those things.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Everybody, thank you again for joining this week. What an awesome week and what an awesome show with Mike Levy, and just sharing all the things here that's happening with Flow Racing and FloSports just in general. Once again, thank you to all the people who make this possible. Obviously, Executive Director Wes Buck. We have our producer, Executive Producer Wes Buck, our producer of the show, JT Murder Tundra Hudson, to our sponsor, Racers Club. Make sure that you go out and get your merchandise at racers.club. Make sure that you sport your merchandise at the Pro Superstar Shootout. And we'll see you all next week on another episode of Drag Illustrated's The Racing Business.